This episode of From Angel to Exit is brought to you by the CEO's Right Hand. The CEO's Right Hand provides customized outsourced finance, accounting, and human resource services tailored to small and medium-sized businesses. Their services include fractional CFO, HR support, capital raising, and financial infrastructure development. They emphasize personalized engagements and expert support to drive growth and operational efficiencies. If you want to find out more, visit theceosrighthand.co. Are you serious about planning a successful business exit? From Angel to Exit is your go-to resource. Subscribe to our newsletter at eckfeldt.com/podcast for even more valuable insights. And to get personalized guidance, take our free exit readiness assessment. It's just 24 questions, and it will give you a clear picture of your exit readiness. Find the assessment at eckfeldt.com/exit. Submit your results, and we'll schedule a free follow-up call to discuss your specific situation and the best way to maximize your valuation and ensure a successful transaction. Now, back to the episode. Welcome, everyone. This is From Angel to Exit. I'm Bruce Eckfeldt. I'm your host. Our guest today, Travis Luther. He is exited founder with two different companies, Trial Line and Queen Anne Pillow. We're going to hear about those and the stories and the experiences that he had and what he's doing today. He's really he's doing some interesting work, and I hope we have time to get into it and what he's doing with the community and some really important work as well. So excited about all that. Let's get into it. Travis, welcome to the program.
Good morning, Bruce. Welcome, or thanks for having me.
Yeah, welcome. It's a pleasure.
You're welcome.
Yeah, it's Monday morning, and this is our first conversation, I think, for both of us. So let's before we get into the actual founding stories and the exit stories and stuff like that, we'd love to just get a little personal background, what was your, I guess, personal, professional background? How did you sort of get into business? Did you always want to be an entrepreneur in kindergarten? Was this your dream? Give me a little bit of that story.
Yeah, I came from a very poor family. My mom got pregnant with me when she was 15 and was a single mom of three boys by the time she was 19. So we lived largely, as I grew up, on, state assistance and welfare. And so, money, unfortunately, was always kind of front and center of my mind, whether it was, not having any of it for the things I wanted, like, Nikes or something like that, or whether, it was kind of the shame of other people knowing that I didn't have it, And so, I just from a very young age started looking for opportunities to try and to take care of myself or get the money I needed for baseball cards and stuff. And so, like many entrepreneurs, I had a lot of paper routes. I would go dumpster diving on the weekends, recycling aluminum and glass and, taking that to the grocery store for nickels. And so, I just kind of always had this entrepreneurial spirit about me. And I think that as I got older, I moved out of my house a couple weeks before I turned 16. And had to drop out of high school, unfortunately, to take care of my two younger brothers. And I think my interest in entrepreneurship kind of shifted from this, fun thing to get me the things that I wanted to this realization like, oh man, I don't really have a lot of opportunities here in life, and I'm going to probably have to create them for myself. And so that's when I really started looking at, owning businesses as just kind of a permanent part of who I was going to be and what I was going to do. And, so from a very early age, I think at 16, I opened up a skateboard and snowboard shop with a friend of mine, took a loan from his parents, and that ended up getting robbed. Well, not robbed like by gunpoint, but somebody broke in and stole everything, So that was my first lesson about insurance, right? You got to have insurance.
It only counts if you get it before the event.
That's right. And then that same idiot friend of mine and me, we started a coffee shop, and after, a couple of years after that, and I just kind of continued on there, trying things that were not very successful, not realizing the lessons I was learning along the way. And then in 2004, I think I moved to Denver, and all that history of all the things I had tried and attempted and failed at kind of came together in unison as I started a new business doing advertising. And then I suddenly kind of was having success and realizing what I learned and applying those lessons to my businesses. And so, really largely for the last 20, 25 years now, haven't had to work for anybody else and have been a self-sustaining entrepreneur.
Good for you, man. I'm curious, I have two questions. One, what were some of the lessons that you learned, like what that came together at that point, right? I certainly know the school of hard knocks, right? Like sometimes you wish there were easier ways to learn some of these, but what were some of those lessons? That's kind of my first question. Then the second one, and I'll let you kind of answer them in the order you want, is when did you feel like you went from, kind of needing to be an entrepreneur and, needing this to kind of get by and create the kind of the money that you needed, the income that you needed, to being, hey, well, I actually have something going here and my kind of core needs are met. And I'm now creating something that has some real value that I'm like, this is changing my life kind of situation.
Yeah. Easy. I can back into that. So, part of my story, kind of unrelated to business too, but is that, I hadn't really got a college education. And so when I came to Denver, I was having some success in business, but I also wanted to go finish this degree I had started. And then after that, I didn't feel like I was done with school. I really enjoyed learning. And so I went to grad school too. I say all this to say that about a year or two after I finished grad school, I ran into somebody that I knew through the university that I went to, and she saw that I was part of EO, this entrepreneurs organization that the university was helping sponsor, and she invited me to come back to the university in adjunct. And so I ended up getting weaseled into teaching full time for about 4 years. I didn't realize that was what was going to happen, but that's I don't know if that was always her plan. It started out with, hey, could you come be a mentor? And then before I knew it, I was like writing a syllabus for 3 or 4 different classes. But what I loved about that is it did actually give me an opportunity to kind of distill those lessons down into some work that I could give to the students and some warning that I could give to the students about, hey, this is where I screwed things up, and this is how you'll be successful faster if you avoid it. So, the first thing I always pounded with them was, you have to be solving a problem in the market. You have to be solving a problem that's so painful that people are actually willing to spend money to fix it, right? Yeah. And so if I look at some of my earlier businesses, the skateboard and snowboard shop and the coffee shops, these were more like passion projects. Like, I think at the time I was really living this whole like, hey, if you do what you love, you never work a day in your life. But there's like some information missing from that scenario, right? Like, if you do what you love that solves a problem for somebody and they're willing to pay for that, then
that has money that can pay for it. Yeah.
Right? So it's like that Cliff Notes version without all the information was what I was relying on. And so I was, I was doing things that I love. I loved skateboarding at the time, I loved going to coffee shops and seeing art and watching bands, but no one ever asked me to do that, or that never was presented to me as a problem. It wasn't like we didn't have enough skateboards in town or something. So that's really what I teach, right? Like, make sure that you're solving a problem, that you're not just doing something that you think would be fun or good for you. Unless you want to have like an owner operator hobby business, that's fine. Yeah. Right? But if you want to build an enterprise that's going to take care of you and eventually your family and give you retirement and money to buy a home and all those things, then you have to solve a problem at scale. So, or you have to solve a problem for more than just yourself. And for me, solving the problem of having a coffee shop to hang out with never got me the millions of dollars that I really wanted to have the good life. So that's the first one. The second one I always talk about is partners. New entrepreneurs always say, oh, Bruce is just like me. He'll make a great partner. He and I love all the same things. We know all the same things. We're going to go build, this widget company. And then me and Bruce get down to brass tacks, and like, we have no other skill set that would be helpful to building the company. So I say, kind of look at your partners as pieces of a working puzzle, right? Just because you have agreement about stuff doesn't mean it's going to accelerate your efforts as an entrepreneur. So it's much better if Bruce is a finance-minded person and Travis is a marketing-minded person, then that's probably a better fit than Bruce and Travis both having an excellent finance background but not knowing how to sell anything, right? Yeah,
exactly.
So,
yeah.
And then the third thing I always talk about is your cost of goods. Like, I mean, I have many lessons, as you can tell. I love to talk, but the top 3 are, find a problem that really matters, pick partners that are beneficial, not the same, and then really understand your cost of goods. And so I often had gone back to my coffee shop example, where I said my whole pricing strategy was about figuring out what Starbucks charged and then charge a little less and think that would be enough incentive to pull everybody from Starbucks to my coffee shop. And I never knew, to be perfectly honest, how much it cost me to make a latte, and then when I thought about it, it's not just the the latte, it's the espresso and the milk and the cup and the sleeve that goes over it and the little straw that goes inside, and how often does someone put a sweetener in it, and how often does somebody take a carrying tray, and you really got to understand every little detail of your cost of goods sold so that you can price appropriately and profit appropriately to stay alive and grow.
Yeah. I've seen that not happen too many times.
Yeah. And it gets really hard in services too. If you're a graphic designer or something like that, it's even harder to figure that out.
Yeah.
I think your second question was, when did I realize it was all coming together?
Yeah. When did you feel like you went from kind of scrappy, like I'm trying to figure out how to put this together to kind of make an income, to, oh, I've got something that actually has some enterprise value that it's gonna grow and has some future in it?
Yeah. So my first big success in my first company in Denver was a company called Valet Ads. And so when I moved to Denver, I did that largely to return to school, because I had believed all this stuff that some people close to me were saying, which is entrepreneurship's a pipe dream and you need to go to college and you need to, settle down like everyone else. And like I said, the 10 years previous to that, I had been building and basically burning businesses to the ground. And I was starting to wonder if I had what it took, to be an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
And so that had got in my head a little bit. So I came to Denver. My best friend had moved out here and he said, just come out and check it out. I started college, and while I was going to school, I worked as a valet at nights, parking cars in Cherry Creek, which is our ritzy part of Denver here.
Yep.
And while I was sitting there handing out these, giant valet tickets, I thought, gosh, what if I could sell advertising on these? What if I could take the blank side of this valet ticket and sell stuff to these people who obviously have money, right? Like really high-end people. And so I went to the owner of my valet company and I told him about the idea. He said, I don't think it's going to work, but if you want to try it, go for it. And I said, okay, well, if you don't think it's going to work, do you care if I reach out to every other valet company in Denver and ask them if they'll partner with me too?
Yeah.
He said, I don't care what you do. So
Nice.
I went out. There must have been 5 or 6 valet companies in Denver. I partnered with all of them. I got a volume of something like 30,000 tickets a month that I thought I could circulate. And then I put a little packet together, and, within 2 weeks I had my first client, Mercedes-Benz, doing a lease deal. And then once that first ticket was out there, I just got calls, and I did great business. I did great trade. My first commission was like $14,000. And as I kind of say, the year before I got here, my tax or my total income was $9,000. Right. So like in one transaction, I made more money than and that felt like, I was like, hey, I'm getting everybody's ski passes. It was just, I couldn't believe it. I did a deal with the Kroenke Sports, who owns the Nuggets, Pepsi Center, and the Avalanche, right? And so part of my deal with them was trade. So I got some partial season ticket packages as well as the money. And I had just started dating my wife at the time. And I'm like, hey, you want to go to a game? And she's like, yeah, sure. And we're sitting courtside, and she's like, who is this guy? Which is funny because I was asking myself the same thing. I was like, this is totally going to fall apart. But I think, it was that kind of recognition that like I had taken an idea, right? And I had solved the problem. The problem is, how do you reach the educated and affluent, right? And I had figured out the best way to do that by putting an advertisement in their hand. And it had nothing to do with anything, skateboarding, music, or snowboard, or any of these other things. It was just like, I saw an opportunity to solve a problem for advertisers. And then I also understood my cost of goods sold. I understood value pricing, right? So like, what did it cost me to print those tickets? A couple $1,000s. What did I charge for them? $20,000. How happy were the people who paid it? Tremendously happy, right? So it wasn't like cost plus, where I was like, well, it cost me $3,200 to print the tickets. Let's add 100%. Here it's $6,000. It was like, well, I created this cool idea that only I own, and people will pay a lot of money, a premium for it. So that was a massive lesson. And then having that money, those lessons, that understanding, that carried me on into the next ventures that were even more successful, so successful, in fact, that, Valet Ads became a side project and then nothing at all. Yeah.
So let's talk about the first company that you ended up growing and selling. How did that idea come about? When did it start? How did it transpire?
Yeah, Queen Anne Pillow was the first company I sold, though probably not as long of a history as Trial Line, but I'll talk about that pivot.
Yeah.
But I did eventually, the woman that I met that I took to the Nuggets game eventually
Hmm.
became my wife, and she was a lawyer. And so at some point, when we were first dating, she realized I had this knack for,
Hmm.
technology and art and design. And so she referred me to other lawyers who were looking for work like that. And eventually I built this company called Lawfather. And so I just served kind of the digital design. And eventually we
Okay.
did trial consulting, and we went to court, and we made 3D animations and poster boards and
Oh,
all this
interesting.
stuff.
Okay.
We sat in trial and ran all these exhibits and demonstratives for trial. We'll get back to that in a second, because that
Yeah.
plays into the Trial Line exit. But while I was working there, I was coaching Little League baseball, and I was crawling all over the place, picking up baseballs for little
Oh
kids. I
boy.
was
Yeah.
crawling all over courtrooms, plugging in cables and taping down wire and all this stuff. And eventually my back gave out, and
Oof.
I had a couple back surgeries.
Oh no.
Um, but while I was laying in bed, I remember seeing these ads like, oh, we have this pillow that can fix your neck pain. And I thought, oh, is there any pillow that could fix my back pain?
Hmm.
So I did a bunch of research online, and I found that there really was no back pain pillow per se.
Okay.
But what I did discover was that pillow shopping was like such a silly, weird experience. You'd have a
Yeah.
pillow that was $4, you'd have a pillow that was $400,
Hmm.
and understanding the difference between any of them seemed impossible. Like they just didn't explain it or
Yeah.
whatever.
They all look the same.
They all look the
Yeah.
same. Yeah. And so also I had, this background in online marketing and expertise in online marketing. And so I was like, God, I wonder if other people are having the same problem picking a
Yeah.
pillow, right? So I do some searches, and I basically find like 25 million people a month are searching for pillow related questions or something crazy like that. I don't know what the
Hmm.
exact number was, but with my expertise in SEO and paid search, I was like, I think there's an opportunity here. So I made some pillows for myself, really liked them, decided I would expand that line, and that became Queen Anne Pillow. And so again, it was a problem-based business in which my premise was, if I can educate people about the differences between pillows and how they
Hmm.
perform, I can make better recommendations to them about which pillow is right for them. And if I can do that successfully, I should be able to build a pretty successful company. This was definitely at a time where, I don't know if you read Tony Hesch's book about Zappos, but,
Hmm.
he has a similar story as I do, which is everyone's saying no one's going to buy pillows
Yeah.
online. No one will buy them if they can't hold them or touch them, just like
Yeah.
they were telling Tony. No one will buy shoes
Nobody
online if
says
they
shoes
can't
online.
try
Yeah.
them on. And so I took that to heart with this like really great customer service experience, where if you had an issue, we would just continue to solve it until you got the pillow you wanted. And
Hmm.
so those people who seemed like a pain in the ass became these awesome advocates to
Yeah.
what we were trying to do, and would leave reviews and talk on social about it. And yeah, that company grew pretty quickly. I brought my father-in-law into it. He had retired, and a couple of years after I'd launched, he said, "Do you have anything I can do?" And
Hmm.
like I said, I had the other legal tech company. I said, "I have this side project pillow business you can
Yeah.
help me with." And so he came in, and yeah, we turned that thing on, and then what really happened was over I mean, it was always growing, right?
Yeah.
It kind of shifted its focus from a side project to having dual
Yeah.
getting attention for my other company. Um, and then over COVID really rocketed it even more.
Yeah. Sure.
People were staying home and buying stuff for their bedrooms. And
Hmm.
so, yeah, it was like, we started to have, I mean, it was a big boy business at that point. It was not a
Hmm.
side project. It was EO qualified.
Yep.
And we were starting to balance real challenges like cash flow, especially. Right. And so we
Yeah.
were
Sure.
selling this massive amount of product. That product would be sitting on boats for a long time. And
Hmm.
it just kind of came to this place where we realized we were going to need some financing. We were probably going to need some partners. It was time to expand the product line. And, my father-in-law was older. This was always
Yeah.
a deal for us, just to have a side project. I wouldn't say he and I weren't in agreement, but just like, we started the company for specific reasons, and those reasons changed, or those
Yeah.
challenges changed. And then we had this great couple of years after COVID. I was like, look, maybe now's just a good time to sell and
Hmm.
call it good. And it turned out we were right. And yeah, so we sold that in I think 2021 or 22.
Okay. And how, I guess, so the desire to sell, or the impetus to sell, was sort of situational, and growth of the company and the situational the situations of the founders or the, key people involved. How, like, once you decided to sell, what was your next step? Like, how did you kind of plot out the process for selling? Who did you get engaged? What did you kind of know and not know? I'm always kind of curious, once people kind of go down this path, like what starts to happen or what do you run into?
Yeah, I think the first thing he and I both wanted to know is like, what's it worth, right? Because we were making nice distributions, and it was a pretty easy business to run, and so it was like, hey, are we going to get to a number that makes it worth it for us to go through this headache in lieu of our distributions? And so I just kind of, having been an entrepreneur for many years and around many entrepreneurs, I had some sense of how a business was valued. But the first thing we did is just kind of get an informal valuation from a broker who could tell us what the market looked like for, pillows and manufacturing and stuff at the time. So we kind of took that multiple, which I think was like 3.5 of EBITDA, discretionary earnings or something, and then applied that to what our owner discretionary earnings were, and said, okay, is that enough money to jump? And it was like, yeah, that makes sense. And so then we engaged with that broker, signed a formal agreement, and then let him go to work, making listings, sending it out to his network, putting stuff online, and
pretty easy process. I mean, in terms of actually finding a buyer and doing due diligence and term sheets and all that kind of stuff. Any learnings there that you'd pass along?
The biggest lesson I took, so our business, like I said, I thought was pretty simple. It wasn't $100 million project. It was a business that could be bought with SBA financing. And so, there was a lot, there were a lot more people interested, I guess, because the route to financing the purchase was a little easier and less expensive. But also, this is very much a very different story than Trialline, but like the first person that seemed serious, the first company that seemed serious about buying ended up being the company that bought.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, that usually doesn't happen.
Oh, no. So when they came on the scene, right, and they were like, oh yeah, we'll pay the price. There was like no negotiate. There wasn't any of this offer, counter offer, and so what I'm thinking, right, is like,
this is how it always works.
True, right? This is way too good to be true. This is going to fall apart, and and we just keep going through the due diligence and the process, and it doesn't fall apart. It never falls apart, and we sell the company. In retrospect, what I realized is that we had a really good company, right? And I had organized it. It was very solid. The financials were very solid. The revenue was very predictable. And when you start due diligence, you usually sign you take some escrow money, and that usually closes off the opportunity to entertain other offers or talk to other potential buyers. So we have this buyer come in. He offers us exactly what we want. We take the escrow money and we go through due diligence, and he buys. What I would do now is I would keep that door open more, and I would use the idea, or I would see what other offers come in. So I would
create more of a competitive environment.
Yeah, just because somebody comes in and makes the offer does not mean that you have to sell to them. And I wish I would have waited a little longer to see who else kind of came out of the woodwork and how they may have even competed on the price. Which is funny, because when we set the price, I was totally happy. I got the money and I was totally happy. A month later, I was like, what the hell did I do? I must have lost money on this deal, So.
It's so true, though, because these prices are so relative, and it's so emotional, and it's, it cuts into your ego. All these kind of things start to play both ways, right? In that case, it's like the other way. I've seen deals fall apart because people have this inflated sense of what this company is worth because they're all tied into it emotionally. But on the market, it's just like, it is what it is. And you're not going to find a buyer at that price. And they just can't justify, or they can't reconcile those two things.
Right. Yeah.
So you're doing this all at the same time. So Trialline is going on while you're doing this. Yeah. So I guess my first question as we go to Trialline is, how did that experience shape your view of Trialline, either in terms of how the company should be run, its possible future, a possible exit? I mean, did this set you up in a certain way of saying, oh, now I'm just going to do this again?
So let's rewind a little bit. I told you about my father-in-law into the business, right? Great guy, love him to death. But family family and business can get kind of bloody and weird and stuff
Uh-huh.
like that, right? And I remember making like one promise to my wife, which is, I will never let money or this business
Huh, okay.
do anything or change me in any way that would create this conflict between me and your father. Like there was nothing that would ever be worth destroying that relationship. That being said, not that the relationship was destroyed, but I had vision for what I wanted to do with
Yeah.
Queen Anne Pillow, and I thought we could do more. But I also had Trialine on the side, knowing that I had this other entity too that was doing well, that
Hmm.
also had possibilities and maybe even bigger possibilities than the pillow company. It's interesting to think how I would have behaved if that wasn't the case. If all my
Hmm.
eggs were in the Queen Anne basket,
Yeah.
I don't know that I would have sold right then. Uh, I had this other thing that gave me some freedom and latitude to not be so wrapped up in the pillows. And so selling Queen Anne also was because I was like, and I'm going to shift my energy to the software company, and I'm going to do it again with the software company. I'm going to commit to so many years to build it back, to build it up and then
Yep.
sell it. And so that played a role in why and how we sold Queen Anne, was
Yeah.
this idea that I could go and do it again with the other company that I had complete ownership over.
Hmm. Yeah. And that's interesting because I think that does certainly play into the dynamics of entrepreneurs, where this is, particularly if it's their first one and they've been on it for a long time, they kind of feel like this is their one shot, right? They've got to really make it count, and if they
Mhm.
don't really have a plan for what they're going to do next,
Yeah.
it puts a huge amount of pressure on that transaction and can really kind of skew the both kind of the logic and the emotional kind of process that they're going through.
Yeah, I mean, not to skip over Trialline, but since those sales, I've been invited to do a number of different talks and panels
Yeah.
on what is life like post exit,
Mm. Yeah.
and how is it different from what you thought it was going to be like. And one thing I hear from my other fellow founders and myself is just exactly what you said, that not enough of us had a plan for what we were going to do next. You have this company for X number of years. Once you decide you want to sell, whether it's 3 years before the sale or 3 months, everything becomes about strengthening the company and
Yep.
building it and getting it ready for sale. And what happens next is so rarely considered or thought about. But what you believe is that as soon as that sale is done, you'll have this huge sigh of relief. Everything will be great. You'll have money in the bank, and then you can like figure out what you want to do. And for a lot of us, we think that, and then within a couple of months, like we didn't plan for what we wanted
Hmm.
to do. We hadn't thought about what was going to come next. I remember my wife asked me, she said, "Well, what do you want to do next?" I said, "All I want to do is I want to re-sign up for my subscription to the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times. I want to get up every morning and I want to read the papers." And
Uh-huh.
that's it. Like that's the thing that I hadn't had time or really hadn't been able to do for a really long time. And that was
Yeah.
my plan. Right. So, and, what I realized, and what these other, men and women that I've spoken with or been on panels with and realized, is like, we are entrepreneurs, right? And
Yeah.
and so it's not that we are the owner of Queen Anne Pillow or we are the owner of Trialine, but we are people who get all of our vigor and excitement and thrill and purpose and meaning in life by building businesses. And so when you don't have that and you don't know what you want to do, it becomes a very unsettling place, right? And you
Hmm.
feel very unsettled and unsure about your place in the world. That's the first thing. The second problem that happens is, now what I told myself, and part of my reason for selling my businesses was I was saying things like, this is no longer aligned with who I am. This doesn't feel like what I
Hmm.
had planned for myself.
Okay.
20 years ago, I never thought I would have this 18-year career in legal. I was always more of a art and design guy and a musician and stuff. And so I was like trying to grasp at
Go back to your
doing
roots,
something
kind
that
of.
felt more authentic to me.
Yeah.
Right. Um, but so then you get your little bit of money, you get your little bit of free time, and then you panic over not wanting to make a mistake next time, right? Because you're like, oh, I made all these promises to
Exactly.
myself. I made these
Yeah.
promises to my
Pressure's on.
wife. I told my kids I was going to go live authentically. And then I'm like, okay, I'll try this. No, that's not it. I'll try this. No, that's not it. I'll try that. And you just feel
Interesting.
paralyzed by
Interesting.
too many choices, having not made a plan pre-exit, and now you don't want to make the wrong choice or invest your money in the wrong thing, and you're just like, holy crap, like I'm just stuck. I'm a marble statue of a man who used to be, and I can't make any freaking decision about what I'm going to do with my life.
Well, that's an interesting one, because it is, I think, when a lot of times when we start companies, it's like, it's a little bit like, I'm just going to throw caution to the wind, right? Like I'm trying to figure things out, right? It's opportunistic, right? There's not a whole lot of fear of failure. And it's almost like I kind of assume this isn't going to work, so I'm just going to go for it. I'm going to swing. But now that you're successful and you've got some money, and now it's like, I don't want to fail, right? I don't want to screw it up. And that becomes like you said, you get paralyzed.
Yep. Totally paralyzed.
Yeah.
Totally paralyzed. Yeah. So with Trialline, so my company that I told you about that I started shortly after I met my wife was called Lawfather. And when we first started, we did web design, SEO, and paid marketing for lawyers, mostly personal injury lawyers, trying to help them get clients from the internet. And this started back in 2007, 2008, when that was the wild, wild west. And we could be very successful, very fast, and nail all of our promises. And if you were with us, you could get clients from the internet. That started to get definitely harder and harder and harder. And then requests from our attorneys became different. Like they kind of just looked at us as a tech company because we did web and marketing. And so they would say things like, hey, can you do any videotaping, or can you rent me a television, or can you come to trial with me and help me make sure the projectors work and all that stuff. And so our business kind of shifted in this way in which we kind of were moving from being a coding web company to a technology company. And we were spending more and more time in court consulting with lawyers on not how to make websites that sold, but how to make case presentations that sold or won juries over, right? And it was actually pretty fun and very exciting, totally unexpected. But yeah, so then the bulk of our business became consulting with lawyers, renting projectors, AV equipment, television monitors, going into trial, sitting there. The lawyers would turn back and say, Mr. Luther, Mr. Smith, can you pull up exhibit 14, go to page 6, blow up paragraph 7, and so that's what we did. But as part of that work, we made a lot of timelines that we would put on poster boards, and then those poster boards would go on easels in front of the jury. And there was a time when I was like, man, can we make a digital one? Because the lawyers would come in and they give you let's say 40 facts, right? Yeah. And then they'd go have a deposition, and they come up with some new genius idea on how to win the case, and they want to move everything over and add 16 new facts and stuff. I mean, and to them it's no big deal, right? But to us, when you're dealing with these layered files of thousands of layers, I mean, it's a very cumbersome thing, right? Yeah. Or they'd have somebody on the stand, and then at lunch they'd be like, hey, can we move the timeline all around because of what this person now said?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
No, you can't. There's no way to do that, especially over lunch. Yeah. And so I was like, man, there must be a web-based timeline program out there that we can quickly do this for. And so I went and looked, and the stuff that I saw was not what I had in mind or very helpful. And so I had one of my coders in the office code me up a little something in WordPress, actually, just to kind of finagle some stuff. And I put a fake case in there, and I remember taking it home to my wife and showing her, and I was like, what do you think of this? And she said, I think this is the future of your company. And I was like, yeah, I kind of do too. So, we started development of this SaaS-based interactive timeline program that lawyers could basically make these timelines on their own. They could create a timeline with events. They could attach the relevant documents or bills or emails or voicemails or whatever to the events, and then make these beautiful presentations that they could open, close, swipe, and give them.
There's a graphical, it's a competitor like PowerPoint and stuff like that, but it has a lot of movement to it, and I forget.
Oh, Prezi?
Prezi, yes. It sounds like a Prezi kind of
similar to format. Prezi. Yeah, I would say it. Yeah. And so I kind of turned my personal attention and my finances towards developing this software, while Lawfather continued to hum on. And then after about 2 years, we had something that we were ready to present to the public. And so this was right at the beginning of 2019. And so, we had no customers really, but we were submitting our software to different competitions and different legal tech boards and Twitter feeds and just stuff like that. And we started getting a lot of traction. We won some awards. We got invited to come to pitch competitions and stuff like that. And so it seemed like by the end of 2019, we were well on our way to really having a good 2020 and a good launch. And so early in 2020, we got invited to present or premiere, if you will, at the ABA, American Bar Association Tech Show in Chicago. And so this is February of 2020, and it's awesome.
Perfect.
Awesome. Everything's perfect. And then COVID, and it's just like, oh, good God. And so, I didn't know what was going to happen. I mean, my other business was totally focused on going to trial, and they shut the courts down. The courts ended up being closed for 2 years, right? It wasn't like a restaurant where I could have 50% capacity. I mean,
exactly.
Suddenly
Zero.
I had no
Goose
business.
egg. Yeah.
Queen Anne Pillow also had taken a dump in those first couple of months, right? Even though that unlocked and changed.
Around,
Yeah, but I was just staring, and I hate to have another COVID horror story, but I just did not know what was going to happen. And I felt very panicked, and all of my cash had been dumped into this software. And then kind of similar to, what happened with the pillows is now lawyers are doing some remote hearings. They're doing some, and eventually they end up doing these remote bench trials where you just do a kind of a trial in front of a judge. And so Trial Line starts to get some traction because of its ability to present cases clearly in this remote setting and over Zoom. And so our revenue builds, our customer base builds. And then I'm kind of going through this thing with Queen Anne, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to sell Queen Anne. I'm going to put all my attention on Trial Line. And I do that for a couple of years. And then I just keep having those feelings that I talked about earlier. Like this isn't me. This isn't aligned with kind of what I thought I would be doing or my purpose in the world. And so I said, it was also combined with a lot of continued overhead development debt that just seemed to never frickin' stop, right? So it's like
it tends to do that.
Yeah. So I was like, I think I'm going to go out and sell. I think I'm at a point where I have enough revenue and enough customers that this is definitely valuable to somebody. And so, I started putting some feelers out. And so I was also getting a lot of contact from other legal tech companies and PE, private equity groups that were interested in buying too, or had been tracking my progress. And so this time it wasn't so much that I went out to a bunch of people. It was more this belief that because so many people were coming to me that maybe I should start to entertain these things, where before I would say, no, I'm not ready. I'm still working on it. I'll talk to you later. I was like, no, let's do it. And so I did. Yeah. And so those engagements were a lot more cumbersome than the Queen Anne one. I mean, they required a lot more due diligence in the technology side of it, the development side of it, the potential side of it, just the intellectual property side of it. I mean, there was just a lot more sophistication involved in that. And I kind of had set myself a deadline. I think I decided to sell in, let's call it, January of 2023. And I was going to, if I hadn't sold by June of 2023, I was going to take it off the market and then fully commit to 5 years of development and really building to be like that $100 million sale price thing, right? And so, I went through due diligence with a couple other legal tech companies that were also PE backed. It seemed like I was getting close to getting an offer that I was going to entertain. And then that Silicon Valley Bank thing happened. And the questions started getting stupider. The responses to my to things I would answer for them were just dumb, and I could just tell, like, these aren't real people with real questions. These are scared people trying to figure out if this is really going to work or if they should get out of it. And their money's now tied up or gone or whatever. And eventually it just kind of fizzled out. And I was so frustrated too that I also just kind of stopped engaging. And I was in South Africa with my wife. We were there for an EO event. My wife fell down some stairs and broke her leg. And we ended up getting stuck there for a month because she had to have massive surgery. She couldn't fly. She was in a wheelchair. My clock for myself, actually, so it must have been May 1st. My clock for myself selling the company was running out. The only conversations I was having with people were that they were no longer interested. And so I really left for Africa thinking I was going to sell the company, come home, fresh start, to getting to Africa, realizing that was all falling apart. My wife has this massive medical crisis, and now we're renting a condo waiting for her to heal so we can get back to our 2 teenage boys who are in the United States. And a couple days before we left, a guy who had heard about my company being for sale called. He had a technology company in Oregon. He worked in secure data storage. He worked with a lot of people in finance, but wanted to move into law. He saw the opportunity, just as I did, for that law was going to move to the cloud, and there would be all sorts of needs for these cloud-based services, but the security issues would be solved, which was a lot of pushback that I got, HIPAA violations and stuff about not having secure data and all that. He knew exactly what he wanted to do. He made me a very generous offer. I was so gun shy. I think I asked him for like $25,000 in escrow or something, which is like, usually you ask for $5,000 or something. Yeah. I was like, how serious are you? Because my heart has been broken. My wife is,
exactly.
over here. I'm stuck in Africa. Like, I just don't want to screw around with anybody anymore.
Yeah.
He gave me the money like the next day, and within 30 days we had the deal, and probably 45 days I had the money. So, it went from this just, the sky is falling, this is never going to happen, to this phone call that changed everything and helped me move on. Yeah.
Well, I have so many questions, and we're not going to have a huge amount of time. I'm kind of curious, like how has it shaped what you're doing now? Like, how has these experiences, as an entrepreneur going through these exits, how does that landed to what you're focused on now in terms of, what impact you want to have, what work you want to do? Like, how has it fed all this?
Yeah, I like going back to my teaching and stuff. Like, I've always, in my own background, I've always wanted to inspire people to entrepreneurship. And so now I look more at the kind of activity I can do to do that. Like the teaching hasn't just been the teaching, but then now I'm speaking, I'm coaching, I'm keynoting, I'm doing workshops. Like, I'm trying, I have this real belief that this is a possibility for anybody. And I have a real belief, especially with people with my background, that like, this is the key to moving up the social ladder. Right. And it gets a lot of tongue-in-cheek attention, but it doesn't get serious attention. If the world was serious about the possibilities for entrepreneurship to improve people's lives and alleviate poverty, we would be teaching it in grade school. We would be teaching it in middle school and high school. We would have more opportunities for it and more colleges with dedicated programs to it. And I just don't see that. So I try and go out into the actual world and inspire people into entrepreneurship, but show them, yes, it is possible. Like, these things are possible. You just, like anything else, you just have to know how to do it, and there's like 10 rules or whatever, and you get those nailed, and you're going to be successful, right? It's not as scary or risky as anything else.
It doesn't have to be. Yeah.
It doesn't have to be. Yeah. And so that's what I've been working on personally. And then, I have always been an environmentalist in one way or the other. While I owned my pillow company, I learned some hard truths about how that industry affects the environment, and how big it is. And so now I've relaunched a new company called Moso Pillow, MOSO pillow.com. And that company is all about creating environmentally sustainable, non-toxic bedding products. Wow. So I feel very excited about that, because I feel like that's, again, I'm back in bedding, but it's super aligned with what I'm trying to do for the world too.
I love it. I love the kind of retooled focus here.
Yeah.
And figuring out how to level things up a little bit. Travis, this has been a pleasure. If people want to find out more about you, about the work that you've done, the work that you're doing today, what's the best way to get that information?
Yeah, my website, travisluther.com, is probably the fastest and easy way. And then I post most of my content on Instagram, which is at Travis Scott Luther.
Excellent. I'll make sure that information is show notes. Travis, thank you so much for taking the time today. It's been a pleasure.
Bruce, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.